And yeah, for me, I wanted to change the way people look at the world, give them a view of the world that makes things more coherent, which may bring some disturbing things to the surface, but at least you can turn the light on and see what you've been tripping over and see what everyone else is stumbling over. And then we can start to clean up the room a little bit. So it has a big goal like societal change, but books don't change society by themselves. People change society, and we wanted to give people a pair of goggles, a pair of glasses, or maybe remove the glasses they're wearing that they don't know they're wearing and show them the glasses. Be like, oh, this is how we are trained to look at things, and this is why it doesn't get us what we say we want in this society, like health, for instance.
Kosogor Podcast.
And we are live. Daniel, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for coming.
Zdravo, Ivan. Did I say that right?
That's right. That's right. It was very interesting. Your new book is out, and I was listening the book on the Audible, and I received a message from our mutual friend, Igor, and he's like, hey, would you like to interview Daniel Maté? He just published a new book with his father, Gabriel Maté, and I'm like, I'm just listening right now. I'm texting him.
Oh, what a coincidence.
I
That's
know.
cool.
And I'm like, is this even possible? And then I was like, sure, yeah. And then we just exchanged like a couple emails, and here we are. So thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure. There's a word in Yiddish for that. I think it's beshert, which means it's meant to be.
It's meant to be. All right, beshert.
It's beshert. Yeah, it's a destiny. It's written in the stars.
Yeah, it's just like, and then I was reading, I was listening to the book, and then I just want to share a little bit from my experience, and then we will dive into the whole thing. But this is not the first book from your father that I'm reading, and stories from the last book and then this book are very disturbing, I would say, but also they're sending a really strong message, at least for me, and that is that first, I'm very thankful for my life. I didn't even know how many problems people can have, and now you mentioned destiny, and I was like, it was very hard to digest some stories. It was very hard to say, oh yeah, life is fair, or it's you start questioning so many things, and then the book was named like Myth of Normal. And then when you start questioning what we accept as normal and what we accept as that's how things works, it's just like very, very, very hard to stay peaceful. And I was like driving to my work, and I would listen, and then I would come at work, and my friends will ask me like, is everything okay with you? And I was just like, well, I just heard a story about a woman who forgave Hitler, and that shaped the whole energy of mine. How was the writing process for you?
I mean, someone asked me this yesterday. The writing process for me, I was one step removed from the material because I was focused on it as a writing project. I was focused on just making the text as enjoyable, exciting, humor-filled when there was an opportunity to add some humor, because I think material this heavy needs some lightness. As you're saying, it can be very, very heavy. My dad is the one who had done the interviews with these people, so the transcriptions were already done. And so I was treating it like, okay, here's the material. How can we make it as digestible as possible? So that in some way that kept me slightly at a comfortable distance from the horrors that people are describing in some of these stories. Some of them got to me more. Excuse me.
Bless you.
Yeah, some of them got to me more than others. Definitely the stories of from Indigenous Canadians, the multi-generational, the things that families go through are just incredible to me. But two things. I mean, number one, the book is also full of a lot of inspiring stories, a lot more than my dad's previous books are. I mean, because healing is right there in the subtitle, which is never, well, that's not true. Scattered Minds had healing in the subtitle, but there's a lot of success stories, so to speak, in this book in terms of people really healing, transforming their relationships with themselves, and some of them curing their diseases, although that's not the point of healing, as we say. So that lightened things up. And number two, I just enjoyed the process of writing it, of working with my father. It was a great challenge. And I got to bring my own special skills and perspective and talents to the table. So it was a less heavy experience than it was for my father, who was really carrying a big weight of, oh my God, this is my magnum opus. Is the world ready for what I have to say? Do I have anything to say? Do I know how to say it? I was pretty confident from the beginning that I knew how to help him do this. So, you know, I think I had it easier than him, although it wasn't easy exactly. I mean, working with your father, as you can imagine, is never a simple thing.
Then you said two things. What was the number two? Do you?
Oh, that was the second thing, that it was just enjoyable as an exercise to work with my father, which took my focus off the content so much and just focused on the process. And someone said something really lovely to me in an interview I did the other day. He said you could really feel how relational the writing is, that somehow you can tell, the reader can tell that it's the product of a collaboration between two voices and two people who know each other very well and who are very different but complementary. And I thought to myself, wow, if you can feel all that when you're reading or listening to this, that's really amazing. I mean, that was really moving to me.
The book that I read previously was Ghost of Hungry Realms, and it took me more than 2 years actually to finish it, because it was very heavy to read those things, because I never before that I've never learned knew anything about those kind of stories and lives, you know, because like when you start thinking about self-development book, self-help book, they're usually very, like you said, inspiring. They're not talking about all this stuff that are actually very, very important. But what you said, it was challenging working with your father. How did this writing this book impacted your guys' relationship?
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about that. I'll just say though, what made In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts also very unique is that it's partly a memoir of his work in a very particular, very impoverished, traumatized neighborhood in Vancouver, where I was born, with a lot of indigenous people, a lot of women in the sex trade, a lot of people with HIV, people with hardcore drug addiction. So essentially poor people. And most self-help books are written for comfortable upper middle class people. The whole self-help industry, in a lot of ways, I mean, there are books about deeper trauma, but generally speaking, personal development is kind of a luxury pursuit in our society, right? So to come across a book about addiction that is not a how-to, it's not like 12 easy steps, not that the 12 steps are easy, but like 5 easy steps, you know, it's not that. And it also uses as the entry point the most extreme examples, the most extreme cases of addiction, as a way of making the point that we're all addicted to some degree, and as a way of, so that's what made it a very shocking and sobering read for a lot of people. This book, we talked to people from a whole lot of different backgrounds. What was it like working with my dad? How did it affect our relationship? I think it greatly deepened our relationship. It updated our relationship into the present moment. I had always complained that he didn't see me as an equal. And he once said to me, Daniel, I can't make you my equal, which felt like I was stabbed in the heart. I was like, ouch. But in the next moment, he said, I also can't make you not my equal. Only you can do that. I was like, oh, okay, touche. You're right. It's the way I'm looking at it. Well, that's partly true, but also he was looking at me through an old filter. It wasn't just me. And working with him on this book, his faith in me, and then me having to show up as a professional collaborator, it allowed me to set boundaries that were hard for me to set just as his son. Because I write musical theater and I have collaborators all the time, and you have to learn what's your job and what's the other person's job. So I would learn to say no to him. I was like, Dad, no, you can't talk to me that way. Or or to set rules. Like, okay, if I send you back a chapter that I've because often he would write the first draft of the chapters and then I would take it. And sometimes I would heavily molest these chapters. I would do a lot of things to them, change them around. And sometimes, depending on his mood or his fatigue level or just his opinions, he'd be shocked by what I did and maybe a little displeased. So at a certain point, I had to make a rule. I would say, Dad, you have to sleep on it. When I send you something towards the end of the day, you don't get, because he would call me up immediately and be like, Daniel, you're a very good writer. It's very well written, but this sounds nothing like me. And you're saying all these other things. And I would get defensive. And eventually I was like, why are we doing this, Dad? Take the day. Have a sleep. Because often what would happen is the next day he'd wake up and be like, Daniel, I reread it. It's great. I know what to do with this. So just coming up with little life hacks like that, because we have these ingrained habits that just don't work. They just generate more conflict. So learning how to set new conditions without drama too, because the drama comes from our personal relationship. The drama does not help our professional relationship. So it was like training wheels on a bicycle to learn a new kind of balance, a new kind of skill. And in the process, we each got to see each other and know each other in a much more present moment way. So I got to see him as a human being, as a insecure, unsure, neurotic, creative person, which I can relate to. It made him more relatable to me. And I think he saw me as an artist and a craftsman and a grown-up with my own take on the world that really rounded out his. And he really felt how much he really depended on me to do this book. And he was very grateful. So to have that dynamic where he can actually say to me, I could not do this without you, and really mean it, that was very meaningful to me.
Wow, that's probably something that every son wants to hear, you know.
I think so, on some level. I think so. And not everyone does. So I feel very fortunate. And the other thing is we just had a lot of fun because, I mean, my dad and I, one area where we've always connected very effortlessly is language. We both love language. We love word games and puns and jokes. And it was a very talkative family, and there were upsides and downsides to that growing up. But now as grown-ups, he's a writer. He loves literature. I'm a musical theater writer, a lyricist, a songwriter. So, self-expression and the choice of words and the music of it is very important to me. And here we are passing Microsoft Word documents with words full of words back and forth to each other, really enjoying each other's work and having fun and enjoying the process. It was great. It was it was very playful a lot of the time when it wasn't serious.
Amazing. And then the book that you guys wrote was it's moving, and I would like to go deeper into the myth of normal. So my question for you, once you made a deal that you are going to write that together, what did you decide to be main goal of the book? Like you said, like it does have a lot of stories that are very hard to digest, but at the same time it has an inspirational stories. It gives a lot of tools. It gives a lot of advices, deep advices. Also, what I like about this book is that the whole thing I was listening, I would write questions. It made me question so many things. And then I think that's like the biggest advantage of this book, because usually books tells you what to do, but this book made me question so many normalities today. And then especially from my perspective, coming from a country from Balkan, when we are raised completely different, and I moved to America, where in California, where everything is the opposite of what I was learning when I was kid, and like there is no boundaries, there is like slightly no shame here. Everything can be, everyone is separated, you don't know your neighbors, you're just like going to work, you're free to express yourself, you try to find I can imagine telling my dad I'm lost, I'm going to find myself and like just travel. My dad will be like, you're here, where you want to find yourself, it's just completely different vibe,
Different mentality.
mindset. Yes. So
Yeah.
reading your book and like putting all these perspectives and into those questions, it's just like it's a perfect timing also, because I became a father 20 days ago, and then relationship between kids and parents. I want to go into everything, but let's start with my first question. It's just like, what was your main goal? Yes, your mission.
Yeah. Well, first of all, it makes me very happy to hear you say that it left you asking a lot of questions. I would so much rather inspire better questions in people than try to give them answers. I don't trust my answers as being nutritious for other people. I mean, I can answer questions, but in terms of how to solve things, I don't know. I want to give people better eyes to see what is there, because I actually trust in people's creativity, resourcefulness, wisdom when they see things clearly. The problem isn't that we aren't smart enough to know the answers. It's that we're not awake enough to know the questions. And we live in a mythologized normality that kills our curiosity, that dampens our ability to wonder and ask questions, ask profound questions. And as Socrates said, the unexamined life is not worth living. So I think part of both of our mission, I mean, my dad always, his mission in life is to wake people up to what he calls the truth. The truth is not a concept that I refer to very much, but that really resonates with him, the way things are, and to free people up, to have people be free. And yeah, for me, I wanted to change the way people look at the world, give them a view of the world that makes things more coherent, which may bring some disturbing things to the surface, but at least you can turn the light on and see what you've been tripping over and see what everyone else is stumbling over. And then we can start to clean up the room a little bit. So it has a big goal like societal change, but books don't change society by themselves. People change society, and we wanted to give people a pair of goggles, a pair of glasses, or maybe remove the glasses they're wearing that they don't know they're wearing, and show them the glasses. Be like, oh, this is how we are trained to look at things, and this is why it doesn't get us what we say we want in this society, like health, for instance. Like the first line of the book, which I'm proud to say I wrote. It's terrible. I could go through the book and highlight the sentences that I know were me, which is not very collaborative. But but in the most health obsessed society of all time, all is not well. It's a profound irony, but everyone knows it's true. So the question is why? Where are we missing the mark? We wanted to empower people with that knowledge, and to connect people with the realization that they're not alone. They're not the only people. You're not the only one who sees it. You're not the only one who's struggling. And also, even if you've never gone through any of these gnarly, terrible, horrible, dramatic, capital T traumas, which certainly your country has, even if you haven't. So you're the product of a pretty traumatic national past, obviously. Which I don't know enough about. I need to learn more about Serbia before I go there next month. But even if you don't have capital T traumas in your past, we're all carrying emotional injuries that we're not aware of. Most of us are, at least. And if we can get cognizant of them, we can be more compassionate to ourselves, more compassionate to others, and we can start to be more flexible in our own lives and live more authentic and satisfying lives. So I think that was the goal. To provide a lens that clarifies, crystallizes, and empowers people to live truer to their actual values and intentions, and to be healthier.
When you say authentic lives, what do you mean by that?
Because it's a tricky word, isn't it?
Yeah, because like once you start thinking, oh yeah, this is me, I'm very authentic, and then you start like, I don't know, wearing black or wearing only blue, but then there is like a group of people who also dress same like you. So are you authentic, or you just want to be part of one group, one movement?
So it's a great question. Authenticity is a very tricky word. So many of these words, when they enter the pop psychology realm, they lose a lot of their power. They become buzzwords, they become brands, they become aesthetics, and they can lose a lot of their meaning. And so, as we say in the book, I mean, look, capitalism sells us a bogus version of authenticity. Be yourself. Like you're saying, wear black or get a nose ring or, pick the identity that feels right to you. And nothing wrong with any of that. But authenticity in the way we're using it is a lot more than just that. It's more than just self-concept or self-identification with this or with that. So authenticity shows up in the book in two main contexts. One, as a fundamental human need that all of us are born with, and it's a survival need. So we're not talking about some frou-frou new age concept, not some luxury item you get at retreat centers. No, if you were a wild animal, if you were a rabbit, say, out in the wilderness, how long would you survive if you weren't connected to your authentic gut feelings? Not very long. You'd be dead. Authentic comes from the Greek word autos, meaning the self. So it means connecting to someone's essential self, knowing one's feelings, knowing one's experience, being able to listen to one's impulses and instincts and honor them. And we need that throughout the lifespan, but that need sometimes gets subordinated to another need, which is to attach to our primary caregivers. And if our primary caregivers don't have the emotional, psychological bandwidth to accept all of us, then we may suppress parts of our authenticity in order to survive, in order to keep that relationship. And then if those get ingrained as personality traits, then we forget that we were ever otherwise. I mean, no child is born suppressing their emotions or anything about themselves. They have no control. They can't suppress anything. We learn to do it, and then we forget that we ever could express those things. And then we're living a life where authenticity is compromised. We're living a constrained version of ourselves. And the other context in which we use authenticity is related, which is in the healing section. We call authenticity one of the 4 A's of healing. And what we mean by that is regaining that connection to the self. And putting on a new pair of jeans or changing your hair color could be an expression. Once you connect to some part of yourself, it could be a natural expression, but it's not the thing. And yes, it's ironic that capitalism basically ruins everything it touches, as far as I'm concerned. Consumer capitalism, anyway, it makes us into consumers rather than creators. And exactly right, authenticity becomes a brand, and you want to sell as much of it as possible. So now you're conforming to whatever you think authenticity is. It's totally backwards. So, but it's very important to understand what we mean by authenticity. And if that word is too worn down for you, if it's too cliche, then you got to find another word. Connected with myself, keeping it real, like knowing who I am, knowing how I feel, whatever word you want to use. The other thing I like is that authenticity etymologically is related to words like authorship, like being the author of your own life. Same root. Also authority. You're the authority on your life, right? So, and autonomy. So authenticity, as opposed to some affect or some pose or attitude, it's a connection to an inner resource, an inner GPS that guides us through life and that really never fails. Even if, obviously you can't prevent accidents and catastrophes in the life of a human being, but it's our deepest connection to ourself. If you're a spiritual person, you'd say it's your connection to your true essence, your God essence or whatever. So yeah, I think it's totally understandable that some people hear that word and they're like, I don't know if I believe in that. But that's only because you're talking about the artificial version that we're sold. That's not the real deal.
you do love words and language. Like
Oh yeah.
I learned a couple new words right now. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Uh, but I would just like to stay a little bit longer on the authenticity. And here, what I found interesting here. Also, I'm not trying. I don't want to sound like I'm judging American culture. I'm just like very comparing so much right now because it's so new for me. When
Yeah.
I came here and then I started talking with like younger people at my work, and then they will tell me that they tried more drugs that I knew exist, or they like sleep with so many people, and they're 21, 22, and they're saying that as a normal thing. And for me, that's opposite from my values, from something that I was raised, from my mindset. And then I asked, like, from pure curiosity, I was like, what made you try those drugs? Why do you have need to change so many people in your life? And then they always answer the same question, like, I just like trying to find myself. I'm trying to connect with myself. I'm trying to find what's right for me. And I'm like, but do you feel closer to you, or did you lost yourself in that way? Because the more things you try, but without any values, without any strong foundation on what do you want to build from yourself.
Absolutely.
Have to
Without a strong without a strong intention, and many people are trying to escape their experience themselves, and they're searching for that authentic self that they lost touch with a long time ago. They don't know where to find it, so they find it in external things, whether it's substances or behaviors or other people. Yeah.
How would you in the book it was very with those 4 A's, and it's very like you make a path for us to look to that authenticity and for yourself. But let's just like dive in a little bit about that. What would be your advice or your few steps to really understand that you are connecting with yourself instead of like losing yourself in that process?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the first thing, my dad always says about addiction, don't ask why the addiction, ask why the pain. And in a sense, in a broader sense, what you're talking about, that constant flight from the self, that constant search for the self through other things that can never possibly. I mean, look, some psychedelic drugs or even recreational drugs can give us an experience of part of ourselves that we've lost touch with. Sex can turn on parts of us and remind us of parts of us. But then when it goes away, you lose touch with it again, right? Or it's very easy to do that. I would start with, what am I running from? What problem am I trying to solve? If I'm trying to find myself, where did I lose myself? Because I was born totally whole and complete. Where did I lose touch with it? And also get in touch with the pain of it, first of all, because you're constantly running around doing things. And especially with phones and internet, it's so easy to distract ourselves constantly. We never have to stop. And the corporate world doesn't want us to stop, because when we stop consuming, they stop profiting. But if we are committed to healing, we have to stop and say, okay, what's it actually like for me to constantly be looking for the next high or the next fix or the next orgasm or whatever it is? How am I actually feeling underneath that? When the high, when the buzz wears off, how do I actually feel? Well, let me tend to that feeling, because that feeling of emptiness or lost or grief or boredom or not being comfortable in my own skin. Keith Richards from the Rolling Stones talked about Rolling Stones in his book, his memoir. He talks about, addiction as the convolutions you go through just not to be you for a few minutes or a few hours. Well, what am I uncomfortable with in myself? What's missing in myself? You start asking these questions compassionately, which takes a little bit of patience and presence. But then we start getting real. And then we say, okay, I really miss something. I miss a connection to how I feel. I miss a connection to my body. I miss a connection to other people. I'm really hungry and I'm stuffing myself with junk food and it's never filling me up. And that's what starts the process of healing. I think healing wants to happen, but we have to participate in it. We have to get on board the vehicle. So that's what I would say. Don't judge it. Don't make it wrong. I mean, there are societies that are way too strict about this stuff. Don't have these experiences, don't, which is another way of suppressing your, look, experiences are good. There's nothing wrong with having adventures and whatever, but at a certain point you have to realize you're not going to fill yourself up from those experiences. At best you can learn from them, but you're asking exactly the right question. What's your intention? What do you really want to reconnect with? And are there ways you can reconnect with it that don't depend on some external stimulus?
You mentioned social media right now, and then I remember one quote from the book. It says like social media is something that you can get enough, but you don't need it. And then that's how it like once I heard that sentence from Myth of Normal, I was like, that's the best definition so far that I heard about
that's
addiction.
The definition, and that's the definition of any subject of addiction. Exactly. And as there's a great quote from Dr. Vincent Felitti who says, it's hard to get enough of something that almost works.
Oh, yeah. Oh.
And all of these things almost work. That's what we keep going back to them. It's the best available replacement for the real thing, which is love, connection, presence, calm, peace, God, whatever we're looking for.
Let's go back for the Myth of Normal. You talked a lot about toxic society, and it's very obvious. Now we can name like junk food, social media, consumer societies. It's very funny when my wife moved to Serbia to live with me. And then we came back to America 3 years after, and she told me this is like very hard for me right now because I feel that I have to buy all this stuff. I have Amazon Prime again, and it's very easy. It can be here in like less than 3 hours if I order right now, And then in Serbia, I didn't even need this stuff because I didn't even look at this stuff, And it's like a completely, like vibe. It's so different. Also, there is a lot of advantages and then pros and cons in both places. I don't want to
totally
present America as like a huge like an anti-people country, and definitely not. But it's just like when you start going deeper, and then from your book's perspective, let me name it like that, like toxic societies, like I said, junk food, social media, news and media here completely, like a Broadway, from my perspective also. And like, what else will be elements of this society that obviously failing us? Because now you can just point and be like, you are wrong and you have to make it right for your life. It's just like, wait a second, like a question. You said it before, I have it here in my notes. Don't ask why addiction, ask why the pain. But like first you have to become real and be like, your inner environment and your out environment is you have to see the whole picture.
Yeah, you have to see the whole picture. That's right. Well, so you use the phrase toxic society, and it's interesting because the phrase we use in the book and in the title is toxic culture. And there's a reason we use culture and not society. Now, there's a lot of toxic things about our society. You're right. And we get into them. Those are the societal elements: politics, pop culture, economics, cultural values, things like that. The word culture has a scientific meaning as well as a sociological meaning. In a laboratory, if I was a biologist, and I was trying to grow a certain microbe or bacterium, I would have it in a broth, a biochemical broth in a petri dish which has certain properties, certain chemical composition, pH levels, acidity, things like that. That's a culture. When you drink kombucha, which you're in California, I'm sure you're surrounded by it. The rivers flow with kombucha in California. You read the ingredients, live bacterial cultures, right? These are cultured, deliberately grown organisms. in that case, gut flora or whatever it is. And that a toxic culture wouldn't necessarily have to be one that has poison in it, but it would just be one that's not healthy for the bacteria in question. So if you put your bacteria in what you thought was the healthy culture and they start mutating or dying off or getting sick or just not thriving the way that their potential would dictate, you'd say this is toxic to them. There's something about this culture that's just off. It doesn't meet their needs. That's the sense in which we mean toxic culture. Now, from there's all kinds of societal manifestations of that. But using our definition of a toxic culture means that we start from the very, very, very beginning. What are our fundamental assumptions about human beings, and how do they match or not match the way it is? So, for instance, in our culture, we separate mind and body. Well, the minute you do that, you're going against nature, and that's toxic to us, because our mind and body can't be separated. A big thing is, what's our concept of human nature? Because everything we do in our society is going to flow from a working theory about who human beings are, or at least we're going to use theories about who human beings are to justify the status quo, right? So in a capitalist society, any economics course will teach you, what is the nature of human beings? Well, we're selfish, we're individualistic, we operate in our own narrow individualistic self-interest. We want to maximize our profits and minimize our losses, and we're transactional beings. Okay, well, if that was true, then the society we live in would make sense. But it seems not to be healthy for us because we're not doing well health-wise. And there's a reason for that. If you look at our evolution as a species, if you took the entire lifespan of the human genus, throughout history, which is hundreds of thousands of years or whatever, and measured it in minutes on a clock, we have been quote unquote civilized since the advent of agriculture only for the last 5 or 6 minutes. Until then, we lived in small band hunter-gatherer groups, and in those groups, it was understood that there is no individual outside of the collective. Anyone who treats themselves like more important than anyone else will be kicked out of the clan or the tribe, because that is actually toxic. It doesn't promote life. We need to rely on each other. Which is not to say that there wasn't war and violence and mistreatment in those days. Of course, we've always been complicated. But in terms of how our culture was set up, it was set up to promote the part of our nature that is collectivist, that is communal, that doesn't even question that we're all interconnected, and that we're connected with the plants, the trees, the planet, the atmosphere. So when you start from a faulty premise, you end up with faulty outcomes. So in our society, not understanding what human beings need coming into the world, which comes from how our species evolved, means we don't understand that kids need unconditional love more than they need behavioral modification. It means that we don't understand that kids need safety and security more than they need even material comforts. We don't understand that kids need free play more than they need math skills. And I'm talking about not just to succeed in the world, but to thrive as an organism. And we don't understand that cognitive ability is actually built in the brain upon emotional regulation, that the emotional centers develop first. And this is all in the science. This is not just sociology or anthropology. We know this now. Medical science, medical practice, Western medicine doesn't apply it, but that's because Western medicine is more of a church than it is a science. It's an ideology. It's a set of assumptions and superstitions that are impervious to science, at least so far. That's why we wrote this book. So the toxicity comes from a mismatch, a clash between what the organism needs and what the culture around it is providing. And the myth of normal is the mechanism by which that mismatch becomes made invisible. We don't see it because we just think it's normal, that whatever happens to be normal is natural. It's just it's just the way it is. Well, it may be normal, but it's not natural. And whatever isn't natural to us isn't good for us. That's why we call it toxic.
You said that if we are selfish individuals who only thinks about themselves and want to make a profit for themselves, then this society will probably be a good fit. But it didn't. It isn't. And also, like, I will argue that because I think that we have like a stronger need to help than to be helped. We feel more comfortable when someone asks us, like, even like, what's the street I'm on, and I'm like, yeah, this is sure.
Yeah.
And then they're like, I feel good about, like, I just helped him, like I didn't save his life,
yeah.
but maybe I did. I don't know. I'm just kidding. But like, you know what I mean? We want to
Sure.
help. Like, I remember in 2014, when we had a situation in my country that like the whole city were flooded, and then immediately after 30 minutes everyone became the same. It wasn't important anymore how rich you are you poor, who you are, who is your grandparent or father. We all became the same. Like, I remember that we like lived in coherency and like all together for so many months. I would say like more than a year, repairing, rebuilding houses. And then it was like very interesting that people from Croatia, from Bulgaria, from Russia, from everywhere around the world came there, volunteered, and we were happy. No one thought, oh, we ate potato today, or like, oh, we have to get to eat, like, I don't know. It wasn't important what you eat. It wasn't important what you're wearing.
Yeah.
It was just important to help each other. And
the catastrophe woke you up to something about your nature that gets lost in the drift of normal. I mean, I live in New York City, and I wasn't here during 9/11. I was still a few years away from moving here. But people who were here, it's weird, they speak nostalgically about those times. Of course, people were scared and grieving and upset. It was traumatizing. But there was also a sense of, you look on the subway, you're on the subway, you look into a stranger's eyes, and you have something deeply in common. You're deeply connected. And that, of course, faded away with time. Normal took back over. But there is something about catastrophes. COVID did that sort of, but the problem with COVID was that because of the lockdown policies, I'm not going to get into the politics of that right now, but it just happens to be the case that with the lockdown policies, we were all isolated from each other. So our ability to be connected was mediated through technology, and that's unequally distributed. And so that the inequalities between us became very pronounced, even though we got in touch with our need for connection, And then, of course, the politics around COVID and, vaccinations and mandates and all that. And now all of a sudden we have another reason to hate and distrust each other. But you're right. These, just like catastrophes in our own life, there's so many stories. All of the inspiring stories in the book happened to people who went through something none of us would want to go through. Metastatic breast cancer, the Holocaust, a terrible divorce, abuse, whatever it is, sometimes all of the above. So just like an individual personal cataclysm can wake something up in the individual, it can happen on the community level too.
It was interesting. I was 5 when it was war in Serbia, so I kind of remember situations. But during the COVID, I live in a small street, so we all know each other. You don't have to knock on the door to get in the house. You just get in the house of your neighbor.
Yeah.
And also there's like new generations coming, so kids are like hanging out together. Like once you become older, grow up, you have to go to work, so people less hang out. But then I do remember when I was 5, we will all get out in the middle of the street, and then we will watch rockets falling down to Belgrade. So I will never remember. That was my first memories that I can recall. So during the COVID and it was lockdown, I'm probably not supposed to say that, but I will not name my neighbors. But a lot of my neighbors get out actually and stay in the middle of the street, like we used to watch rockets. But they were like talking with each other because they didn't see each other for a couple of days. And I told my dad, I was like, I didn't see them gathering together like this like 20 years, and like another catastrophe, and like the whole process revoke again, and they're here. So it was just a very interesting how we actually behave, sometimes probably automatic, but it was very interesting that like 20 years they never gather together in the middle of the street and start talking about random stuff, and
No,
it's just like
COVID was the ultimate disruption in normal. So it woke people up to something.
So we talked about culture. We talked about myth of normal. So what should be considered as normal? I would list just a couple things that I heard from the book, and it's that we should nurture our kids to feel self-confident, to respect others, to be honored, to be curious, to learn. You mentioned free play, and you gave a amazing example. I think it's a school from Finland that has a different approach. It reminded me of my father's approach of my educational level. I don't think he knew where is my high school, and it was very close to our house. He never probably went there. He never asked me for my grades or why I'm not studying or something like that. He will always tell me that he thinks I'm very smart. He would support me, but he would never question my grades or my bad grades or good grades. And today I have a master. I'm thinking to start my PhD and another university, but I just feel free to do that. And when I read that, like that's actually approach, I was like, oh, okay, I don't know how he did it, but he did something good. So, it was very, very interesting. So what should we consider as normal? Let's talk about that.
Yeah. I mean, again, the word normal is tricky because normal has different meanings, including the statistical norm, which is whatever already exists. But in a perfect world, what would be normal? What would be optimal? I think optimal would be maybe the thing to focus on. Yeah. I mean, an approach to child rearing that understands that kids need to become themselves before they can be, as they're being socialized, socialization happens on top of a strong connection to themselves. So they have to have the room to feel everything they feel. So there's a lot of parenting advice out there that just goes against that. They need to feel that the attachment relationship with the caregivers is inviolable. It's unconditional, that it can't be breached, that even if my mom and dad aren't happy about something I did, or even if they don't like something I did, they still love me entirely, and that the relationship is not hanging in the balance of how I behave.
Sorry to interrupt you. How to set that boundary between?
I don't know, because I'm not a parent, so okay. I know you just became a father, but I mean, parents need to deal with their own stuff, because the thing that stops them from being able to embrace all of their kids is not a lack of desire or bad intentions, but it's their own unprocessed emotional wounds. So that when your child shows a part of themselves that reminds you of a part of yourself that you had to suppress, or that was a threat to your parents, well, you're going to immediately get tense, whether you say anything or not, but your nervous system is going to tense up. So that's your work to do, to deal with what you're carrying, so that your children have the biggest possible latitude to just become who they're going to become, which doesn't mean you don't set boundaries or limits. You can say no to certain behaviors, but that doesn't mean you're saying no to the person. You're not making the person wrong. If we lived in a healthier society, we'd be trauma aware. We'd understand that people's afflictions, whether it's physical illness or addiction or mental illness, they're expressing something about the person's life. They're manifestations of how the person has lived, not through any fault of their own, rather than just cruel external interruptions. We'd have a medical system that understands this, a legal system that understands this, an educational system that understands this. There's a lot of things that would, if we could understand how human beings are actually built, we would have very different norms.
Do you think it's a problem of understanding, or do you think there is another drive that is currently here in this culture and society?
Well, yes and yes. Obviously, there are other drives. Like I said, corporate culture doesn't want us to understand. And human beings are very adaptable and we get used to things. So there's a part of us that doesn't want to understand either. We'd rather just stay comfortable, even if it's killing us. But yes, it is a failure to understand. And how do I know that? From all the number of people who have said, I read this book and it blew my mind. What does that mean? There was something they couldn't see before. It was right in front of their face. It was too close to them. It was like water to fish, right? It was too normal. Well, we showed, it's like it was part of the wallpaper, but all of a sudden you start to notice it. So yeah, understanding these things. I mean, because we're not taught this. We're not taught this. We grow up, we swim in water that says mind and body are separate. Biology is individual. So, if you have cancer, that's an individual pathology. But it's actually just not true. But we don't, because Western medical practice hasn't integrated these teachings that science has shown for a long time, we don't learn it. And so we think, oh, there's something wrong with me, or I have this external disease that's attacking me. But once you understand what disease actually is, which is a dynamic process, once you understand what addiction is, which is a dynamic process around relieving pain and discomfort, once you understand what mental distress, mental illness is, which is actually a dynamic process where the mind's coping mechanisms start turning against itself and creating difficulties functioning in the world, or exaggerated qualities. And I'm speaking as someone with a mental health diagnosis myself. Well, then that understanding changes everything, because you're not struggling against it and you're not denying it. You can say, oh, okay, I get it. And then you can see the ways in which society is comfortable with you staying stuck, and you can start to take steps you have some agency, which is one of the other A's of healing. Agency meaning free will, choice.
Agency stuck with me with the idea that even those are that's something that I recall after I listen that part, and it was like, even when you can't change some things, you can change how you feel about those things and make a peace with them.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's the difference between accepting and tolerating. When you tolerate something, you push away your feelings about it. So if I'm in an abusive relationship, which would usually mean that I'm a woman, but there are abusive relationships where men are abused as well. Certainly where kids are abused. I could tolerate it for years, meaning, oh, well, I probably deserve it. It's never going to get better. It's not that bad. All of that. That's tolerating. That's not acceptance. Acceptance is, this is happening. And this is really unhealthy for me. And this is really hurtful. And I'm scared to leave and I don't know what to do. That's accepting. You start from there. You start from how things are. And maybe you can't change the situation, but you change your point of view about it. And it's your point of view that gives you your feelings. I do this thing called mental chiropractic, which is trying to get to the source of why people feel the way they feel based on what their point of view is. If you're stuck in something in your life, it's not because of the external factors. It's because of the way you're looking at it. Now, there are some situations where you're physically stuck. There is nothing you can do about it. Last year, I was in a Mexican jail for 3.5 weeks because I overstayed my tourist visa, and I got COVID in the jail, which meant I had to stay for 15 extra days before they deported me back to Canada. Now, once I was in there was nothing I could do about it. And believe me, I tried. I tried everything. And I tried explaining to them that I'm an important author of a book that's coming out next year, and we're just finishing it off, and everyone's depending on me. And they would just nod at me like, that's very interesting. Next, So I had no choice about my circumstances, but my mindset about it, I had all the choice in the world. And once I realized that, and I realized that I'm responsible for for my peace of mind here. I mean, you read about Holocaust survivors who made choices about their perspective, even in the camps. Primo Levi, the woman Edith Eger that we interviewed, that you mentioned, the woman who forgave Hitler, and she didn't do that for him. She did that for herself. And when we hold on to our resentments, our old stories, we keep ourselves locked in the same experience. So shifting the point of view will give you different thoughts and feelings. But first you have to realize that your current point of view is what's making you suffer, and you have to be sick and tired of it.
In the book, you said that and then you mentioned right now that a couple minutes ago, actually, that we first learn how to feel and then how to think. And right now, when you were talking, I had a thought that we do have like our emotions that like drive us, and then we have our logic that we are explaining our emotions to us. So like you say, like we'll be under abuse, and then we will be like, maybe I deserve, but that's like just a logical way to explain to us why we are suffering and why we are maybe choosing to suffer. I don't know is it the right word, but it is very interesting how once we stop communicating with our emotion, we start falling down.
Well, that's exactly right. And because the thing about logic is a very powerful tool, but it all depends on where it's coming from and who's driving it. It's a vehicle. It's not, it's not the driver. Hitler was very logical. He was also completely crazy, but inside his worldview, everything he did made perfect sense until his world started falling apart. And then the contradictions were too great and he shot himself, right? Because it was all falling apart. But murdering my great grandparents, that was logical to him. That made sense inside of his worldview. The atom bomb made sense to the scientists who created it and dropping it on Hiroshima. Staying in an abusive relationship is I'm not comparing these things, or even being an abusive person. We can justify a lot of things. Human being, there's a reason we, rationality and rationalized have the same root. We can rationalize anything. That's the scary power of our intellect. Now, that's when our intellect is driving the bus and our emotions are in the trunk, locked in a suitcase. When our emotions are the fuel, the engine of the bus, then our logic can say, okay, how can I be of service? How can I, we can problem solve, we can understand, we can reason, we can be, so I don't shy away from logic when I do my mental chiropractic work with people. I try to recruit their logic for a better purpose, to say, hey, is it logical? You say you want peace of mind, but you're trapped in this story about yourself that gives you no peace of mind. How logical is that? So it's like recruiting a better logic.
Where to start with a better logic? You mentioned mental chiropractic. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, mental chiropractic is just my own particular modality that I made up. Someone gave me the name mental chiropractor to describe what I do when I work with people, because he said, you're not like your dad. I said, oh, I should hope not. Because he's him and I'm me, but I didn't know how to describe what I did. So you're more of a mental chiropractor, and being what a chiropractor does, he or she is not looking to, like, yeah, they may see you regularly, but when you come in today, I'm going to make an adjustment. I'm going to adjust something, and you're instantly going to feel the difference. It may hurt for a second, but then you're going to feel the relief. So because I'm not a therapist and I'm not a trauma expert, and I don't have my dad's saintly compassion and patience, I do have compassion, but I don't have that same kind of empathy where I'll just sit with somebody in their deepest pain and go back to their childhood. I just assume everybody's traumatized. I know we're all carrying trauma. I try to hold that as lightly as I can, because what I'm interested in is, okay, what do you want now? And is it true that you have to wait until you're completely healed, until your past is healed? for you to have a powerful sense of agency and authenticity in the present. And I don't believe it is. I think if you can have compassion for your emotional wounds and injuries, and you can also get really intentional, which is to say, I really want to shift this. I don't want to be stuck anymore. And I'm willing to take responsibility for the stuckness by saying, okay, it's very, very likely that it's my point of view that's making me stuck, not the external situation. Well, if you're willing to take those steps, then it's just a matter of having a conversation with somebody who's not you, who's willing to tell you the truth and to point out the inconsistencies in the way you're looking at it. And all of a sudden, there's another part of you that gets the memo, and it's like, oh, wait a minute. Okay, so I do have a choice. Because until you have a choice, you don't have a choice. When you're stuck with one point of view that can only see it one way, there's no choice. The choice is only theoretical. So what I do with people with mental chiropractic is try to make the choice palpable by showing them a different way of seeing it and having it occur to them like an opportunity for more flexibility. And just like a chiropractor, if they make the adjustment to your spine, then all of a sudden your muscles can move and your bones are sitting right and the alignment is there. I'm looking to align people's minds with their actual intentions, which are more authentic than all of their coping strategies. Intentions are at a deeper level than all of the logical, strategic mechanisms that we have to try and survive. Survival is not, when you're in survival mode, you're not in growth mode, you're not in alignment mode. But survival is an important drive as long as it's short term. Like until I outrace the bear that's chasing me, I'm going to be in survival mode. But if I live the rest of my life as if a bear is chasing me, it's going to be a hell of a life. So I do this thing, and my method of delivery is that I take walks with people. So they're walking wherever they are on the planet, and I'm walking here where I am in New York or wherever I happen to be, and we're on the phone together. And moving the body, moving through space, changing your literal point of view with every step helps the brain kind of get a little looser. And then we have that conversation, and they pick one thing in their life that's stuck. We don't deal with the whole shebang. We don't deal with, okay, we're going to heal your trauma today. I can't do that. But I can shake up your point of view about your girlfriend or about your parenting or about your folks or about your job or your career or yourself or whatever it is in a specific way. So that's my way of
what is specific
shifting people's perspectives.
What is specific way when you say right now?
Say that again?
You said like I can shape in a specific way.
Well, so I mean, in the case of a specific situation in their life,
okay,
a present moment situation. And I mean, my way is specific, but I don't know if I can describe it. But like I said, it's about showing people their point of view and showing them how their point of view is nuts, basically, how it's not serving them and how there might be a different one if they want it enough, you know. But so I have a lot of fun with it. It's not heavy, serious work. Even if we're dealing with heavy, serious topics, it's fun.
I think it's very important to hear sometimes that there is another choice, especially when you are like raised and you just see one point and you think that's normal and that's how things works and that's how world works, and then you just like you step out from that perspective, but sometimes you need a hand, and that's also one of the messages that I received from your book, that even that we talk about self-development and it's always pointing like you can do it, you have to do it, you are responsible, you are. And I agree, if you're not responsible for your life, you don't have power over your life, and that's like a very bad position to be. But at the same time, there is a lot of other internal things and external things that you have to be aware of, and one is that therapy can help, that other people can help you, and that you are not alone. And then we have to feel supported by other, but also we have to give a support. So those are very, very foundational things that I read in your book, and then also like from my life experience, my perspective, and like when you put everything together, it just makes more sense. But
I think that's right. And you used the word coherence earlier, and that's a very important word to me. When things are coherent, the word has two meanings. There's the sort of conceptual sense in which if it's coherent, it makes sense, like if someone's speaking coherently, then, but literally, what does it mean to cohere? It means to fit together, to stick, So when things cohere, they're unified, they're integrated, and integration is the opposite of trauma, because trauma is about fracturing, trauma is about splitting off. So when life starts to cohere, and yeah, I believe that you don't need to wait until you do all of the healing work for you to start have things cohere externally. And in fact, if you can have one situation become more coherent in your life, then that sends a message to the rest of you that maybe the trauma isn't your destiny. It might be your fate, but it's not your destiny. That something else is possible. And it might even accelerate the healing process because you realize it doesn't have to dominate you.
well, also one comparing thing, and I'll promise I'll stop saying in Serbia we do this, in America you do this, but in Serbia we don't talk about trauma, and it's more like those kind of topics are going under the rug. That's a literal expression that, like, it's in generations in Serbia. I don't know about here, but yeah, if you feel stuck, lost, sad, not in a good mood, everyone will tell you, like, come on, stop, just stop,
Deal
just
with
stop
it.
doing that.
Yeah.
And then, like,
Yeah.
just to put your smile and then just go on, and then in some situation that can be good, because we do had behave and like we are like just like going under the, oh, I feel depressed right now or something, and it's not real depression, or this makes me sad, and it's what, it's like my fries are cold, so you're not sad for cold fries. But when it's something serious and important, and then we carry that a long way with us, and it's becoming heavier and heavier, then we have to work on that. So my first like I said, like I read the book, Ghost of Hungry Realms, and then that was my first touch with trauma and with addiction in that way, and it was very hard for me to digest, but also at the same time it was a light in the room for me, because then I start thinking about, yeah, we should talk about this. What's trauma? Let's define that. You gave a perfect example right now, like coherence and trauma, opposites. I love the how you explain that. But let's talk about trauma right now.
Sure. Well, so a trauma is a wound. That's the literal meaning of it. That's it's from the Greek derivation of the word. So a wound is something that lasts over time. If someone punches me in the arm and I get a bruise and it goes away tomorrow, that's not really a trauma. It doesn't cause any lasting effect. But if I get a concussion from being hit on the football field, or, that concussion is, I'm talking about American football here. That concussion is the trauma. It's the wound that lasts. So there's the event, and normally when people in the normal world use the word trauma, they're thinking of those capital T traumas: rape, incest, child abuse, abandonment, divorce, war, genocide, growing up in a city that's being bombed. Those are traumatic for most people in certain ways. But trauma is any lasting wound. Any lasting wound to what? To the self, to the emotional self, to the spiritual self, to the physical self, to the nervous system. And all of these things are completely connected. You can't really have one without the other. So how does that look? Well, it tends to look like we get split off from parts of ourselves, or certain parts of ourselves get too painful to feel, so we push them away, so we can't feel them. So some people, the trauma comes from not being seen and heard fully for who they are. And when they get angry, their parents remove their love or their approval. And so we suppress our anger. That's the expression of the traumatic wound, or that's how we try to protect ourselves from being wounded again. So a trauma is basically a deep cut or a lasting bruise on our sense of self, our connection to ourself. And you could say that on a societal level, a trauma is something that lasts in the psyche of a particular group that then constricts them or narrows their range of options or has them behave in destructive or self-destructive ways. I think the Holocaust is a great example. It's very traumatic for the Jewish people as a whole. And when you see what's going on in Israel and Palestine, you see the country of Israel acting out a lot of trauma, which is to say, we never want that to happen to us again. And we will defend ourselves at all costs. And it's a mess. And, you know, sometimes when we act from trauma, we lose our compassion for others. And we start to justify our own behavior. I mean, not to get all political. That's how I see. I'm speaking as a Jewish person. That's how I see that situation in a lot of ways. And this is why people who have been abused sometimes grow up to be the abuser, because they lose their compassion for themselves and they carry a grudge, and they, you know, then they just act it out. So trauma, really, that's the definition of trauma that we go from. And trauma is not what happens to you. It's what happens inside of you as a result. So again, it's not the illegal hit to the head, it's the concussion.
And also the perspective that trauma is a dynamic process, like you said before. Also the direction instead of destination. So
well, that's what we say about healing, actually.
About healing? All right. So let's talk about
healing. Is the direction, not the destination. Yeah. Well, healing is moving in the direction of wholeness, which means bringing coherence to the parts that have been split apart. Reconnecting with ourselves. You know, the term self-improvement is interesting, because if you take spirituality seriously, the self can't be improved. The self is whole and complete and perfect. It's just that we've lost touch with it. So a better phrase, rather than self-improvement, would be self-retrieval, getting back in touch with ourselves, reclaiming ourselves,
how to
remembering ourselves.
How to reconnect with ourselves?
I mean, there's so many different modalities out there. I mean, people who do yoga, some people find that helps them reconnect with themselves. Why? Because they're reconnecting with their bodies. They're reconnecting with a sense of inner spaciousness. They're reconnecting with qualities like courage and fortitude and trust. And I mean, these practices are designed to reacquaint ourselves. Before we can get reconnected, we have to get reacquainted. We have to be like, hey, self meet anger, or self meet peace of, like, you remember each other, right? Or maybe you don't, but it's like we have to meet it again. And then we have to get a taste for it and get kind of comfortable with it, because it might be uncomfortable at first. It's like, this isn't me. I'm not a courageous person. I'm not a vulnerable person. But the fact is, I was born a vulnerable person. So we get reacquainted. We address the blocks to it. We understand why we've been estranged from parts of ourselves. And again, you have to have an intention. You have to really want to reconnect with yourself. And one way to do that is to think about the pluses and the upsides of that. And another complementary way is to look at the cost of not doing so. How is it going for me living in a fractured way? How does it affect my relationships? How does it affect my health? How does it affect my children? So once we get that inspiration really to reconnect, you know, as we say in the book, one of the best pathways to authenticity is to notice when it's missing. And how do you know when it's missing? You just take stock and say, okay, at the end of the day, you get home, you say, was there any time today that I felt like I wanted to say no, but I said yes instead, or I said nothing? Well, that's an example of a disconnect from authenticity. The more you get aware of that, the more you notice it after the fact, the more you practice that, eventually you're going to start noticing it in the moment that it happens, or even beforehand. Oops, I'm about to suppress myself. So it's about building conscious bridges between these qualities as they reemerge, as they come back online. and make themselves known to us, because the fact is healing wants to happen. Our true selves want to express themselves. That's why the authentic drive is so important. As a creative artist, I know this. There's a reason that something in me impels me to write songs and musicals, even if I don't know if anyone's ever going to listen to it. There's just something that just wants to get expressed. And when I honor that, I thrive. And when I don't honor it, I suffer and I regret it.
I would just like to go a little bit back for trauma. And if I understood you, trauma is something that happened to us or something that we wish that happened, but it didn't happen. It can cause the trauma. If we don't choose,
it can cause a trauma, but the trauma itself is the lasting wound.
But if you don't choose healing, we will definitely choose illness.
Well, or we'll choose ill at easeness. I mean, not everyone gets physically sick. Not everyone develops an addiction. Not everyone has mental distress or so-called mental illness, but it'll manifest in some way. And it isn't really a choice until we realize that it's there, right? Again, it's odd. I didn't choose to be born into the family I was born into. You didn't choose to be born in the decade that you were born, in the country that you were born, right? And then you had to cope somehow. We all had to cope somehow. So we develop these personalities. It's when we can find that choice point. What was your question again?
So my question for illness after trauma is more that illness is the answer from or response from something that happened in our life. That's from the book that I got, and that's a very, I would say, healthy view of illness, because it gives you an option to ask a better question.
Yes, it does, and asking better questions is always the most important thing. We have to be careful again with our language when we say, if you don't choose healing, you choose illness. That, if we say it that way, that's a little too close to, it's your fault you got sick. We write about Susan Sontag, the American writer who died of breast cancer. I think it was breast cancer. And she rejected the idea that illness and emotions are connected. Why? Because she thought that was to culpabilize the victim, to blame the sick person. She says, I don't want to be culpabilized. Well, what we say is she was very right not to want to be culpabilized, because it's not her fault. It's no one's fault. It's not even the fault of the parents, because then you have to go back generation and generation and generation and blame the whole world, and blame becomes meaningless. But blame and responsibility are not the same thing. So it's not so much that if we don't choose healing, we choose illness. It's more that until we realize that we're traumatized and we choose to embark on that, then our trauma will rule us. And it'll try to express itself through our bodies and our minds and our behaviors. And you could look at that as a cruel attack, like as if our body and our mind is our enemy. I don't think that's a particularly logical or helpful way of looking at it. So the better way of looking at it is trying to wake us up. Just like if I break my leg and my leg hurts, the pain isn't trying to punish me. The pain is trying to protect me. So I'm not going to go run a marathon tomorrow on that broken leg, because that would be disastrous. So I don't lose the leg, So our suffering is not happening to us, it's happening through us. And it's happening in a way, and it's as extreme as we need in order to wake up. That's another way of looking at it. So you want to look at it in a rigorous way, a responsible way, but not a kind of stoic, I did this to myself way, because that's not even logical. You didn't choose your coping mechanisms, and you didn't choose to forget parts of yourself. If you are the kind of person, there are personalities that seem to be much more prone to autoimmune illness, for example, like the very nice people, the people who have to suppress their anger, the people who never want to disappoint anybody else, the people who put other people's needs before their own. Well, if you became one of those people, you came by that honestly. At no point did you choose, oh, I'm going to suppress my emotions. I'm going to repress myself. You don't wake up in the morning saying, I'm going to betray myself and sell out today and injure myself. I'd really like to get cancer today. No, you did that because that was the best option you had in a very difficult situation as a child. And then in order to keep the coping mechanism reliable, you had to forget that there was an alternative. So it isn't your fault and it wasn't your choice. You had no choice. The question is, what would choice look like now?
Mhm. When I said choose, I thought more like we have two options after that. Or we're going to go on a path to healing, or we're going to path on illness. In that way, not like in a, oh, like you said, woke up and betray myself. That was an interesting one.
Yeah, well, once you realize you have that choice, then you
Mhm.
have that choice. But you really have to bring compassion
In the
and
healing,
not into the healing. Absolutely. There's a reason my dad's healing method is called compassionate inquiry. In the way you're describing Serbian society of like, okay, just get over it. If we bring that attitude into the healing world, then you'll say, why did I do that? I need to do better. Okay, stop using cocaine or stop being a sex addict or whatever. That's silly. Well, that's the mind kind of rejecting itself and reprimanding itself and trying to threaten itself into, and that ignores the fact that those were the conditions that we were probably born into. That was the traumatizing environment in the first place, where we weren't treated with compassion and love and respect. So you can say, I'm really intending to kick this addiction. It really isn't working for me. And you can be disappointed when you relapse, and you can, be as tough as you want to be. But if there's no compassion, then there's no healing, because compassion is the balm for the traumatic wound.
in the last few chapters in the book, you talk about compassion a lot, and
Mm-hmm.
the thing that I would like summarize from the myth of normal that I got as a huge impact was that if we separate us from everyone else, and if we separate even parts of us from the whole part of ourselves, and then including like social environment, physical environment, emotional environment, internal thoughts, gut feelings, authenticity, everything that we talked today, we got this like, oh yeah, this is normal, I can change, this is how it works, I'll try to adapt, which is like
Yes,
our best friend and our worst enemy because we adapt
100%.
so easy to things that we should change before we adapt to them. But myth of normal for me, I said it before, I will just repeat myself again, made me question so many things. And especially the last part that I'm going to read again and listen again, because I think it has to be approached in many different ways, but also how people change and then book change again with them.
Absolutely.
So I think that
Absolutely.
that part is a gold from the whole experience, that obviously walk you through that part and like bring some red flags along the way, but then the last part with the healing actually, uh it was awakening, and it just like you have to digest in a couple bites, let's say like that. I want to personally thank you for writing this book. And then my last question for today, I have so many questions to ask you, and the more we talk, the more questions I have. But now when I met you like online like this, it and then obviously you wrote a book, so you're optimistic, but what drives your optimism about our future?
I don't know if I'm optimistic, because I
Okay,
don't really know
sorry
what
if I
that
assumed
means.
that.
No, 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 that's fine. I mean, I think that's a reasonable question. I mean, Noam Chomsky talks about being, actually, it was Antonio Gramsci, the Italian Marxist um, leader, who's talked about the pessimism of the intellect and the optimism of the will, which means, you know, don't fool yourself. Things suck, like things are bad. And there has to be something in your heart that can see the possibility of a brighter day. I don't rely on optimism so much. I just want to rely on inspiration, because no matter what the situation is, there's something that can inspire me. And I don't even have to believe that there's going to be a particular outcome. That's hope.
Mhm.
And I don't really traffic in hope. I traffic in possibility. I try to, because possibility is present moment. I don't have to wait for the outcome for me to get inspired now. So it's like that impatience keeps me from even, like, optimism isn't good enough for me because it's about waiting to see what happens. It's like it's like betting on sports or something. Oh, I hope my team wins. So I've got no control over that. The question is, what's my experience right now? And if I have choice over that, now, if I extrapolate from that, if enough human beings lived that way and enough human beings read our book and or tuned into the general shift that's happening where people are getting tired of the normal, the status quo, and looking for things that are better, I can imagine a future in which things get better. I can also imagine, by the same token, a future in which things get a lot worse before they get better. I just don't want to be a slave to the prediction game, because you can go in either direction. Who knows? The sun could explode tomorrow. Literally, nothing is promised. So just trying to stay grounded in, like, I found writing this book quite delightful, and I find talking about it delightful, even though it's about, because every conversation I have is creating a new awareness. It's creating a new connection with somebody, a new audience, right? I never thought I'd be traveling to Serbia to speak at a conference named after Nikola Tesla. I mean, that's crazy to me. And so the inspiration is available to all of us all the time, even if it's the inspiration of a fresh start. It's like, oh, wow, healing is possible. Just, possibilities. So I think all human beings have that capacity. And whether, the way I always say it is, I don't know if we're going to save ourselves from global climate change or nuclear war or whatever. We may not. We have the capacity to be pretty stupid as a species. We can be brilliant too, but our stupidity is not to be underestimated. But I will never lose hope, or faith, I should say. It's faith that in the very final moment, before the last human takes their last breath, they have the capacity to go, oh, okay, I get it. And then life is extinguished. But that would be, to me, that's a happy ending. Like, I like that ending.
Let's hope that will not be our ending.
Let's hope not, because I like our planet and I like our species. I do think the Earth's going to be fine with or without us, because it was around for a long time before us. But yes, from the humanistic side of me, I would love to see humanity win. So that would take more and more of us waking up to our authentic selves and not waiting for culture and society to catch up with us, because culture and society has an interest in perpetuating itself, not in healing itself. So we have to drive that change as individuals, and not just individuals, as communities, as families, as couples, as groups.
Daniel, thank you so much for talking with me today and sharing your wisdom and everything that you learned so far. And you just remind me why I started doing these podcasts and then conversations, and it was very beneficial personally for me, and with my daily struggles and whole new life. And then I'm really hoping that people who are going to listen to us right now and your words, that they will find a connection that I found it today. Also, you mentioned that you're going to be in Serbia December 11th. It's a conference, Nikola Tesla.
Yeah, that's when I'm flying. I think the conference is on like the 14th or the 15th. And something like that, and it's in Novi Sad.
Novi Sad, yes. And then what are you going to talk about at the conference? The things that we talked today, or
I don't know.
You don't know.
I'm not even clear why they want me, but I'm going to trust it. I mean, it's a conference about innovation and entrepreneurship and health. So I guess I kind of want to find out more about what people are dealing with there, because the organizer, who's a mutual friend of ours, right?
Yeah.
Told me that often in the tech sector, in the innovation entrepreneurial sector, people don't think about their health enough, especially in that country. So I guess I want to meet people where they're at, get a sense of what people are hungry for, and then just share whatever I can. I don't usually prepare too much for my talks. I'll certainly talk about mental chiropractic because that's something I know more and more about the more I do it. And but we'll see. We'll see. I'll probably take a lot of questions.
Oh yeah, be prepared for a lot of questions. We love to ask. But I interviewed a couple speakers already, like during last 3 years that are going to be at the conference, and then I personally believe that the whole idea is to put the whole aspects and from our life, including our job, our career, our mental health, our spirituality together. So that conference will be putting the whole thing together, and it's named by Nikola Tesla, who created things that we are using this Zoom today. I would argue because of him. So I'm very happy to see you at that conference. I'll be part of that. I have links in the below, so you can find and register and join us. Anything else that you would like to add?
Yeah, if people want to connect with me, I'm on social media, Instagram and Twitter, Daniel B. Maté, M-A-T-E. And my mental chiropractic website is walkwithdaniel.com. People can book a free 15-minute conversation with me to see if it's a good fit for you. And then, it's something I really enjoy doing. And I don't know if I've ever walked with anyone in Serbia. So
there is a chance. There is a chance. Yeah. I'm going to put all the links that you just mentioned right now. And then during the next couple years, I would like to arrange another talk so we can see what changed and how things progress. And then we'll talk about more possibilities.
I would be very happy to. My father and I are writing a second book about adult parent-child relationships, so we'll have that to talk about as well. And I know that everyone everywhere can relate to that one.
Yeah, that's amazing. So I will let you go and start writing that. I'm just kidding. No, but seriously, thank you so much. This was a very deep conversation, and I really enjoyed it today so much.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. And thank you everyone for listening. If you find this useful and that you liked everything we talked today, please subscribe and share with your friends, and see you next time.